It's Monday, it's 12:15 and we're live in Westminster. Joining me, Conservative MP Gillian Keegan, Labour MP Stephen Kinnock, Guardian political correspondent Kate Proctor and Daily Telegraph chief political correspondent Chris Hope. Today, Boris Johnson is welcoming more than 100 new Conservative MPs to Westminster. Many, like these, sent by voters who've never backed the Tories before.
To all those who voted for us for the first time, and those whose pencils may have wavered,
how will Boris Johnson deliver for the pencil waverers?
Should you stand aside for an interim leader?
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Despite his massive election defeat, Jeremy Corbyn says he's going to stay until March. There are plenty of different views about that and who should take over.
Will you be running for the Labour leadership? This is a moment for reflection.
Well, we'll see if I stand.
Let's get through today and then, tomorrow's another day.
Welcome. It is, in fact, the first proper day back after the election. Parliament is sitting tomorrow. Like it or loathe it, there'll be a majority in Parliament for the first time in quite a while. The daily drama that we got so used to probably won't be there. So how different will it feel?
Well, I think it'll feel very different on our side of Parliament. And I think for the country as well, it feels different. For investment, for the markets, it feels different. Everything feels different because now we know Brexit absolutely will be done. It's the end of the second referendum mob and we will deliver on Brexit. And then we can get on with all the other things, including investment that has been, waiting for the country to make some firm decisions. So I think most people in the country are feeling hopeful.
Stephen?
I think we're feeling heartbroken and shell-shocked still. It's quite depressing to think of looking down the barrel of another 5 years of being defeated in the division lobbies, 5 more years of division, 5 more years of an explosion in homelessness, 4 million children in poverty. But the fact that we were unable to defeat this incompetent and cruel Tory government is actually a damning indictment of Labour's campaign. I don't think this was a Tory victory, it was a Labour failure.
Right, well, we're going to talk about that a little later on. I mean, the drama of those knife-edge votes and the questions of will there or won't there be a general election on a daily basis seems to have gone for now, doesn't it, Kate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are going to see a new era where votes go through, Conservative agenda, Conservative policies are put to Parliament and they go through. And we won't have this back and forth, we won't have this kind of delay and these hold-ups in Parliament. But that's not to say that things don't need a great deal of scrutiny. It's just that the time for that might be slightly, diminished because it's a lot easier for the Tory agenda to go through now.
Right. I mean, it's not going to be the adrenaline rush at quite the level that we have been used to. Agenda's going to have to make an adjustment.
It's turned me grey, Joe, the adrenaline rush. It's been quite exhausting to try and cover it, let alone be the MPs voting for it and trying to turning up on a Saturday and then the vote doesn't happen and we go back and we all miss our families. No one should feel sorry for journalists at any point, but it's a bit of a reset, I think, back to I think kind of 2015, the few days after that election when Cameron won a surprise majority. That's what it feels like today.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about what actually happened and why. The papers, many of them on the front pages, are looking at Labour and the leadership contest that is going to unfold. But let's take a look at the front page of the Daily Mail, which has blueprint for Boris's Britain. The PM will put border control, NHS and investment in the North at heart of bid to govern for another decade. On that issue of the North and those traditional Labour voters, swathes of them, who broke with tradition to back the Conservative Party for the first time. Gillian, you don't come from a typical Conservative background. You are from the North. Explain to Stephen why you think all those voters, the red wall that was talked about, turned to the Tories.
Well, maybe as of today, I do come from a typical Conservative background because obviously I'm a working class girl from the North, from Liverpool. I left school at 16 and started an apprenticeship in a car factory in Liverpool. All of my family still live up in Liverpool. I also have lived in Yorkshire and Lancashire as well. So I have great connections still back to the North, even though I support, obviously I live in Chichester and I'm the MP for Chichester. They simply do not buy Corbynomics. There's a lot more common sense in the north than anywhere else, and you will it is common, actually. You'll find it is common. And so people there, they look at this, they don't believe in unicorns, they don't believe in magical answers, they don't believe Corbynomics is not a thing. It is ridiculous as an economic policy, and anybody who supported it ought to be ashamed of themselves.
Stephen?
I think there were three main problems in the campaign: weak and incompetent leadership, the decision to back a second referendum, which massively alienated millions in our Leave voting seats, and the manifesto, which turned into a Christmas wish list. I think we need radical investment-driven economics. The economic model in this country is actually broken. We have the biggest gap between London and the South East and the rest of the country of any other country in the industrialised world. So something has to be fixed, but we went much too far. The 2017 manifesto was far more rooted in realism. 2019 was just a wish list.
Right, but why did those voters actually back Boris Johnson? You've given the reasons that you say they couldn't vote for Labour, but are you saying there was nothing that drew them at all to the Conservatives? Because these are in areas where they've never, ever voted Conservative in many of the seats that did go blue. So what was it, do you think, that attracted them to Boris Johnson's Conservative Party?
I think two massive issues were patriotism and Brexit. If you have a leader of the Labour Party who comes across as someone that doesn't actually ally with our allies, that seems to prefer to believe the propaganda machine in Moscow over our own intelligence services, you're going to really struggle to put that across on the doorstep. And then with Brexit, you've got millions of people who voted Leave in 2016. It's really not, you're in cloud cuckoo land if you think you can go back to those people and say, we're not going to respect what you voted for. Would you please vote for us in this general election? It's simply not realistic politics.
Chris, what do you think the reasons were behind it? Because there was a sort of push-pull factor, of course, but was there something different about this election for those voters in Labour heartlands?
Almost certainly. I'm also from Liverpool, like Gillian is, and definitely there's a suspicion of Jeremy Corbyn, and this idea that he couldn't trust, the advice on Salisbury from the government on who was behind that, and the other concerns that he had. That really matters, but it seemed to be, for the left, that seemed to be a problem. You're a bit suspect because you can trust the state on some key matters. Right,
so there was nothing positive in your mind about the Conservatives. It was all down to Jeremy Corbyn.
I think there is something to be said in the insecurity being a huge issue, that Jeremy Corbyn just couldn't convince people that he was strong in that area. Lots of the places that I went to have a big, like Labour heartland seats, like some of them are army recruiting grounds. You've got barracks there. I spoke to taxi drivers whose sons were in the army, and the things they said about Jeremy Corbyn on security were extremely negative. And that's just, it's an anecdote, but it's it's a kind of an idea that you get that when it comes to being statesman-like and being strong, and I have to say some of these, I do hate to say this, but these kind of like masculine qualities of leadership, they just didn't see all of that in Corbyn.
There's also the worry now, I think, or a concern amongst the people who voted Tory for the first time about what will Boris do for me now. They think, well, that was great, that was last week, but was that the right decision? And that's why you'll be seeing this northern selling of the policies, sorting out the north, and there'll be lots of aggressive push towards the working class.
That's really good. That is so important that happens now.
That will, and it has to happen immediately.
Right, and we're going to talk about the promises that have been made and the potential difficulties for Boris Johnson about keeping those promises. Stephen, have a look at this picture. This is Boris Johnson campaigning in Sedgefield. Sedgefield, Tony Blair's former constituency. How do you feel when you look at those images of the Conservatives all over your heartlands?
Utterly, utterly heartbroken. These are the people that the Labour Party was founded to represent. It is a betrayal of our historic mission as a party that we no longer have MPs in Sedgefield, Bolsover, Wakefield, Blythe Valley, you name it. And until the party is able to reconnect with those places, we are never going to get into power, but we will also continue to betray our historic mission. So it makes me feel heartbroken, but I think there is a glimmer of hope here, which is I think a lot of people did just lend their votes to the Tories. We can win those votes back if we make the right choices over the days, weeks and months. And I urge any Labour Party member who is watching this programme now, please think carefully about how you cast your vote in this leadership election, because I think that this is an existential issue for the Labour Party.
Right, lending their votes. Even Boris Johnson used that phrase. He probably couldn't quite believe that these people have backed him as Prime Minister in seats across Northern Heartlands and in the Midlands. Is that true? Is it just a loan?
Well, I think we've got the opportunity, actually, to transform the lives of people in the North, which is what many of us have come into politics to do. You know, it's been clear for a long time that there are areas, particularly towns, that have been left behind, that haven't had the investment they need in roads, rail, skills. You know, as I say, everyone I went to school with left school at 16. The comprehensive schools, they closed every single one down. There wasn't a single sixth form available to any of us. So, you know, anyone who grew up there has known about these issues, and they're long-seated, never solved by Labour, and now we have the opportunity finally to solve them. I personally do not
You've
think
been in government for 9 years.
Well,
I government for 9 years, Gillian.
Yes, I know we have, but it's the 9
may
years.
have won those seats,
it's the
but you've
9
been in
years
government for
after
9
you
years.
crashed the economy as always.
Well,
and
hang on.
you've always done
hang
it,
on, though.
and now
There is
we've got it back.
But Gillian, there is a point there.
singing
Why,
that
why
song.
haven't you done anything for these areas over the last 9 years?
Because we have had to focus on the economy. They did what they always do, and thank God everyone's dodged a bullet actually with Corbynomics, because God knows what would have happened.
Well, hang on, let's talk about the Tories, though.
We have now got the economy back. We haven't got the debt actually going down yet, but we've got the deficit almost under control. And now we've managed to keep interest rates low. We've managed to keep faith in our economy high. We've managed to keep everybody working.
And at the same time, you haven't led to new investment in the North or the Midlands.
We have put new investment in the North, and we have got transport for the North, and we have devolved power to the North. But all of that is just the skeleton that we now need to put lots more investment in. That will now come. We have the mandate. We have the money, because we've spent time fixing the economy that they broke yet again.
The gap between London and the southeast and the rest of the country is the largest gap of any industrialised country
London's
in the world.
always an outlier.
The Tory government has had 9 years to fix that problem.
We were fixing your last mess.
The bankers and irresponsible deregulated markets are what broke the economy.
If you continue to think that, then you're wrong.
A Labour government that had to intervene to save the global economy. Since then, we have had austerity and a policy of attempting to balance the books, not even managing that, but on the backs of the poor.
Stephen,
and the
you're
most
supposed to be a
vulnerable
sensible
in
one.
society. No, look, we need radical change to our economic model in this country, because it is not working, and we've seen that in terms of the communities that have been left behind. But we need to marry that with a clear, realistic, patriotic Labour Party leader and set of policies.
Right, well, let's welcome in Richard Moss, the BBC's North East political editor, who has come down with a new crop of MPs. What are they like, the new MPs in your region, Richard?
Very enthusiastic. Very enthusiastic. They really sense an opportunity here to have strength in numbers, which has always been Labour's advantage in the North East of England. They have this huge bank of MPs that could campaign and lobby, particularly when Labour was in government, for investment, although there are people who believe that perhaps Labour didn't do everything they could in those years, but certainly Tony Blair would defend the investment in schools and hospitals in the North East. But they sense there is an opportunity here, because not only have they won seats, but actually because of the scale of the Conservative victory, there's a lot of North East seats now that are very marginal. You know, there's seats in Sunderland, in Hartlepool, Wansbeck, Ian Lavery, the Labour Party's chairman's seat, a majority of just about 700 now. One more push at the next election and the Conservatives could become the dominant party in the North East. I mean, the danger for Labour is it becomes a bit like Scotland, that once you start to lose it, it starts to slip away. Well,
let's just show everybody this tweet from one of the new Conservative MPs in your region, Deanna Davison. Here she is, hashtag Team Tees are officially on our way to Parliament. Couldn't be happier to be sharing my journey to Westminster with these 4 amazing lads. Hashtag the Blue Wall, hashtag Chief of Scarf, not staff, as I thought it was at the beginning. Are they typical, traditional Tory MPs?
No, I don't think they are. I think they are very different. And I think where they won, they often had either candidates who were very local, or Deanna, for instance, is a northern, her roots are northern, but she wasn't from the constituency, but had based herself for a year and really worked herself in. Jacob Young, the 26-year-old who probably achieved the most remarkable result, the win in Redcar, that virtually nobody expected. I mean, he works in the local chemical industry. He's born and bred in the area. I mean, I met his mum on the platform at Darlington Station. It was just like
his mum was seeing him
off to university. It was a remarkable scene, and apparently he spent most of his time campaigning in neighbouring seats, but still won. It was that kind of wave, a bit like 97 was in the south. In the north, this was, results happened that you wouldn't have expected. Right.
I mean, how does that feel? You've seen some of the MPs, haven't you, over in Parliament, even though it's not sitting today. What's been your view?
Yeah, I mean, that sense that there is a fresh start, a new start, is definitely there in Parliament. It's quite a buzz, actually, over in Parliament this morning, and something that I've not seen for quite a long time. There's people with Ask Me signs for the new MPs who are trying to find their way around. So the shift, I think, is quite seismic, and I don't think I really appreciated that until I arrived at work this morning.
I just feel like a wave has crashed on the beach and it's swept away these old sandcastles from the previous government. I was looking at Twitter. There are a few people who are now no longer MPs, quite a few of them, and one of them was tweeting in their biography, was once an MP but not anymore. And you can put the strings can start now if you like. And someone else said, "I hope I made a difference," and that was it.
Right.
So, it's quite,
so the sad departure of some of those MPs.
That's politics, though.
Yes.
People are here today packing up boxes, and that's the end. And for some, they've only been around for 2 years. So this time period in British politics has been extremely frantic and swift, and sort of they're gone.
And in order for that not to be the case with this new crop of MPs, Richard, what do they have to do to deliver on the promises that Boris Johnson has made? In other words, you know, if they've lent their vote, how does he keep them?
Well, obviously, Brexit was a factor. No doubt that "get Brexit done" phrase we all heard ad nauseum did hit home with those voters. So that will be their first priority, of course, the vote coming up on Friday. But the Conservatives learned from 2017 that they had to also promise investment in these communities. But, of course, they do now have to deliver. Now, those MPs will be demanding that they get their slice of that so that they have a chance of keeping some of these unlikely gains next time. But, of course, Brexit is an issue because although we don't know what the economic impact assessment was fully of Boris Johnson's deal, every single other assessment of every other single form of Brexit has suggested the North East economy will be the one that have the most handicap in terms of growth if it happens.
Right. What does need to happen? Those voters will want to see something tangible change on their doorstep.
Trains, roads, education and skills, broadband are the investment areas that need to happen. As well as that, we need to reassure people. Stephen used something which I find awful, actually, which he said we were incompetent and cruel. There's something about the left that they tend to paint everybody. They are, you know.
Come to my constituency.
They are
surgery.
Virtual and more.
Talk to the people who've been dehumanised by the PIP assessment.
But you are not. You have all this virtue
society.
signalling, but you do not solve the problems for people. And I am not cruel.
We're not in
and I have
government, that's
not
why.
come into politics to be cruel. So that at the same time, we need to reassure people that those who have extra needs, where they have disabilities, the social care model we need to fix, where they have special educational
needs. Well, let's talk about the social care.
All those things
the social care model, though.
Well.
But Boris
and we
Johnson
need to fix the high streets,
promised an
visible.
oven-ready social care policy, and in fact, it's not there, is it? People may be disappointed to learn that actually he's still going to go through a process of consensus on all sides before actually having anything to offer. Labour did, in its manifesto, have a policy on social care.
We, at the last election, 2017 election, put something forward, and it was a disaster because it's too complex. I don't think most people know the current social care model is. Actually, I do. My nan had dementia, and we still council helps to pay for hair. But most people haven't through that. Don't actually know that today the system is very arbitrary and random, and it's not right. We need to fix it. We need to
authorities.
I think the key to do is to have whatever that model is, will make a difference to local authorities. I'm not saying whether it's going to go through the local authority funding or other areas of funding. If it is, then we need pressure from local authorities.
In order to deliver, you said you need to do the new voters and supporters would reverse things between come to local authority spending be a priority.
The biggest thing we fix is to take pressure away so social care is putting on those councils and the NHS, by the way. That is the thing. It really does need to be fixed. We have to do it cross-party. I set up an APG with the Labour AP to look at the staff elements. We have to do this cross-party, and we have to fix it once and all. Because we need nobody's ever had to do this before. People either die young or they will look after by their own family. This is a 21st century phenomenon globally, actually. It's not just our country. And we need to put something in place. It's almost like they did at the beginning of the NHS. And that was cross-party, despite the fact they take credit, it was cross-party. We need to do exactly the same for social care, so that it is a proper system for all of us.
Involved in that, Stephen?
I think cross-party was very important, very easy to do. We had a very clear pledge in our manifesto, which we social care for anyone who wanted to age 65. I think what we're seeing here is what you can potentially see the unravelling of some very high expectations. Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party making these promises to the people that they will well and behind for the last 9 years. Let's see if they deliver on those expectations. By the way, Brexit, let's not forget the decision on getting an extension. The transition period has been made July, I think we're going to hit another cliff edge. And those constituencies on the North East desperately need friction trade with the European Union, because of their manufacturing base would be utterly decimated by a no-deal Brexit. And if we haven't made a decision on Brexit by July, you're going to get another cliff edge.
Right, Richard, there's been lots of talk about infrastructure and developing that in the North. Gillian has just talked about road projects. Are those things that people really want the region that you are representing? Is it more about cities? Is it more about connectivity at this sort of level?
It's more about buses, because many more people travel on buses than do on rail systems. Of course, one of the aspects that would be popular to North East community would be $20 billion invested in rail services. Businesses in the North East, they need HS to relieve the pressure on the East Coast main line and help develop a rail network that they can use to move freight, move people fast between the northern cities. So there is a tension of what business might want and what these communities want. But of course, all these things take time, and that's the problem of Boris Johnson, is all the infrastructure spend has a long time to go.
Let the groundwork exactly 2023.
I think it's something really immediate though, because Brexit will make that so it's very quick to Brexit and invest in the North and get some of those ideas around sort of within funds and within that period of expectation. I don't think we do too much of a total gesture to actually really start shifting things around London too. The Labour policy, which is to bring our treasury in London in the North. And I thought in some form that's quite sensible. And it will show people that there's a kind of genuine feeling next time, reach out to people that live in England. And the Northern House, it felt so connected at times. You need to see something physical to move.
I mean, also to connectivity. I mean, that sounds agree with how did it actually bring any tangible results? Is it, in fact, really about the North-South, or is it about town and city?
It's about towns, actually, connecting towns. And actually, there are those issues in the south. Well, on the south coast, it's not all about the north, but there is very much a focus on. One thing that always struck me is I've seen as much talent in my most comprehensive schools as I've met in my life ever since, either from the playfield in England or in international business. And what it is really about unlocking that. We need the rungs like those times. There are a couple of rungs missing. The rungs need to be put back in. They'll be different in different places. There'll be buses in some places. Maybe go station trams in others. The rungs need to be put back in, and then the country will really start to take care of
the North. They haven't got one yet. Jake Berry can attend it, but can't.
There'll be a lot of people who put their hand up to do that job. There's a lot of proud Northerners who are Conservative MPs. Mostly they represent South seats. But, there are, and now we've got a whole load new who are Northerners representing Northern seats. And I think that's going to be brilliant for the country and also for Wales. I think it's going to be great for Wales. We've got many more MPs in Wales.
What about the diagnosis? Is it about a North-South divide? You've talked about London and the South East almost as another country, or is it about one of the things that Lisa Nandy, one of your colleagues, talks about, the disconnect between towns and cities?
Yeah, I think that the country is divided now along lines of graduates and non-graduates, city and town, and old and young. And you see that in the way that people voted in the Brexit referendum, and you see that in the way that they voted in both 2017 and 2019. So we need a politics that can actually bring the country back together, that can bridge all of those divides. And part of that is about understanding that, listening, getting the language right, but a huge part is by backing that up with real resources.
What's you to blame?
And what we're seeing is the devolution of blame. So by by austerity, by taking money away from local authorities, particularly Labour-run local authorities, you blame those local authorities. The same with Wales. In 2010, the block grant for Wales has been reduced by £3 billion. And then, of course, the Tory government's been very effective in terms of trying to blame Welsh Labour for that. So let's not have the devolution of blame. Let's get away from all of that and let's try to have a whole nation politics. How about the evolution of
responsibility? That would be good for you.
I agree. I mean, as I've already said on this programme, our manifesto was a Christmas wish list. We've got to root it in realism.
Do you think you personally are to blame for dragging the party? Jeremy Corbyn is a Brexiteer. If it stuck to where he was, he'd have probably improved from 2017 election, maybe, because what's changed since then is the Brexit policy in the party. But people like you pull the party the wrong way against what they're...
Well, hang on, let him answer.
For the last 3 years, I've been saying we should respect the result of the referendum and leave with good deal. I've said that the decision to flip to backing a second referendum was probably the worst decision in the political decision in the history of the Labour Party, and it's one of the reasons.
Revoke was worse.
No, but that was a Liberal.
Democrats.
They were worse, you know.
No. I mean,
you can't blame Labour for even the Liberal Democrats' policy.
I think that the next leader of the Labour Party should be somebody that did not back a second referendum, because politics is about judgment, and that was a very poor judgment call.
All right, let's go back to the priorities of this government. You've talked about the sorts of things that you would like to see happen, and Richard has said some of the things that people in the northern heartlands would like to see. But actually, if we look at the papers, let's have a look at the Times. It says Boris Johnson to take aim at MOD over wasted cash. You're talking about wholesale change to Whitehall, and that will be disruptive, time-consuming, and people don't really care about it.
I don't think whatever they do will be disruptive and time-consuming. Of course, you always...
Won't it? Complete overhaul of Whitehall, changing departments, moving things around.
Who says that? So who says that?
Well, that's
speculation in the press.
So you don't think it's going to happen?
I don't know, but what I'm saying is I would very much doubt that we're going to spend all this time and squander it on an internal, as you say, that nobody really cares about.
Why is this being briefed like it's day one? It's being briefed into a paper.
Because there are areas that have issues in terms of MOD procurement has been known about for a long time. It's almost become a joke. It's almost become a joke. You know, the aircraft carriers without the aircraft, this without that. 10 years late, it has to be done. Now there's the space to do it. So I think that would be very good use of time.
But who's it speaking to? Because it sounds like it might be point scoring.
I don't think so. I think everybody cares about having the MOD and the Army and the Navy with the right equipment, but having something where piles of money goes in and doesn't produce value for money. The one thing that struck in this election, and I think it really struck home, is everybody on the doorstep I met knew that it was their money, not government's money. They know they fund all of this.
All right, we're going to talk about that in a moment. Richard, thank you very much for coming in. We're going to talk to Sienna Rodgers in just a moment from Labour list. But let's turn to Labour. You've already talked about who's to blame for the defeat, and you've called for Jeremy Corbyn to go immediately. Why hasn't he resigned?
I think that's a real pity. You'd have to ask him yourself, but he should stand down. There should be an interim leader, because I think the thought of Jeremy standing up at Prime Minister's questions all the way through to late March is... not a great thought for us to have. So, look, that is what should happen, but we've also got to be clear this isn't just about a person, an individual. It is about a whole set of ideas and ideology, if you like, and we need to turn the page. We need a radical shift in direction. We certainly don't need a one more heave candidate.
Right. What's wrong with him staying, though, and offering some stability until a new leader is put in place?
I think that the signal that you send by not actually taking full responsibility, as a leader should, it says something about the party that we're not listening, that the leadership is still not listening, that he still feels that he has the mandate to stand up at the dispatch box at Prime Minister's questions and speak on behalf of the Labour Party. In my opinion, he lost that mandate on Thursday evening. Right,
but what are you going to do about it? What can you and your parliamentary colleagues actually do?
The constitutional, as I understand it, is the NEC would have to make that decision, but it is extremely difficult to do if Jeremy's not cooperating. So, frankly, I think you have to ask him. He should stand aside. He should take that personal choice and stand aside. If he doesn't, I think it's something that's very difficult to force through.
Right. I mean, what will the Parliamentary Labour Party do? Will you try and exert some pressure on Jeremy Corbyn, or will you just continue saying that he should go?
The tools at our disposal, and the Constitution says it has to be really.
So you're powerless, really, aren't you?
Look, I mean, in the end, the leader of the party has the levers of power, but the leader of the party should be taking responsibility. This was Jeremy and John McDonnell were front and centre of this campaign. It was their manifesto, it's their NEC, it's their shadow cabinet, it was their campaign strategy, it was their communications plan. They have to own this, and the only way they will really own it is by having the decency to stand aside right now. But I don't have a magic wand to make that happen, Joe.
Let's show everybody the Observer from yesterday. This was an article by Jeremy Corbyn. We won the argument, but I regret we didn't convert that into a majority for change. Sienna, welcome. What's been the reaction to that?
Yes, so I think a few people thought that actually he shouldn't have said my responsibility, but just responsibility for what happened. And that caused quite a bit of controversy. But I think he later released a video where he said, I'm taking the blame. John McDonnell also went on the Sundays and since, and on a momentum call as well that evening, saying, I take this on the chin, this is my fault, I totally take responsibility. So there has been some of that. But as you say, as Stephen refers to, there's a bit of controversy over the fact that the full NEC, the ruling body, isn't meeting until January, whereas the NEC officers, which is a smaller group within the ruling body, just 6 people, they're meeting today. And that means that, yeah, replacing the leader and the leadership contest, that's going to be delayed till the new year, when, in fact, maybe the NEC, if it met today or this week, it could have said, well, actually, we want an interim leader.
All right. Well, I mean, there is also discussion about whether this actually will mark the end of Corbynism and the Corbyn project. Jeremy Corbyn has said he's going to go. There will be a leadership contest. But let's listen to John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, on Andrew Marr yesterday.
I think the policy programme we've advocated and the analysis society that we've advocated is the correct one. And I think that holds sway within the Labour Party. No one argued with any individual policy, no member of the Parliamentary Labour Party or any of the party itself. So we signed up to the political analysis that we've got and the programme we advocate. The issue for us is how do we get that message across? How do we have a proper narrative? How do we cut through the media avalanche against us in campaigns like this? And that's what we've got to do.
Stephen, he says no one argued with any individual policy, no member of the Parliamentary Labour Party or any in the party itself. That's true, isn't it? Everyone signed up to that manifesto.
I had serious reservations about announcing the WASPI policy after we'd published the Grey Book. I mean, the whole pitch was we're about balancing the books. This is a costed manifesto, and then you threw in an extra 58 billion. So I think the way that these things were presented was disastrous. The 2017 manifesto, I think, had the right balance. We had the Grey Book. It was costed. But it was rooted, and it was radical, and it showed that we need change. This is not a time to go back to wishy-washy centrism. This is a time for understanding that we need to radically change the economic model in this country, but you've also got to show that you're going to balance the books.
Right, but this is important. So the terms have been set. That's what John McDonnell is saying. We won the political argument. So the direction of travel is correct of John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn.
No, but we didn't win the political argument because we lost the election disastrously.
Right. But you've just said you don't want to go back to wishy-washy centrism. So you agree with the direction of travel of John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn?
No, it went far too far. The 2017 manifesto on the economy was rooted in realism. This one was away with the fairies. But the key point here is what was missing was a sense that we had a leader of the Labour Party that supported our enemies, not our allies. That we had somebody that wasn't actually a patriotic person that loved this country. We had the huge anti-Semitism crisis with the sense that there's a left-wing faction that has these bizarre conspiracy theories about the way the world works. So whatever was happening on the economy, frankly, and then, of course, the disastrous position on backing a second referendum. So, you know, you can have the best economic policies in the world, but if you're swimming against that tide, you've got no chance.
Right. Kate, what do you think of that? I mean, that sounds like some of the economic policies, certainly, Stephen, is in favour of, and in that sense, the Corbyn project will continue.
Well, I think some polling has showed that actually it wasn't the policies overall. Policies was actually quite far down the list of things that the public didn't like. I mean, I spoke to people quite a lot about the WASPI promise, and I'd agree with Stephen. They found that unbelievable and that wasn't going to be possible to deliver that. But the wider policies in terms of, investment in schools, the NHS, especially like some of the policies on education, on childcare.
Nationalisation programme?
No, I didn't hear anyone say I have a problem with that. In fact, I heard people say I'd really want the railways to be nationalised because I think it would help me. So I think it's true, and I think Labour do need to, in this period of reflection, do need to actually take stock and think some of those ideas are popular. It needs another person to lead it.
I think on the railways, that was the one thing that I thought may have cut through with Telegraph readers and the sort of Tory base. I was puzzled by cutting. Season tickets and taking money from the motorway budget. If you live in the north of England, you're basically in a car or on a bus, so it's difficult. I'd make buses a lot in the manifesto. Yeah, but I thought that it was confused. I thought, and who it was aimed at.
I mean, some MPs didn't even talk about that rail fares.
Great for the south.
Because it just didn't appeal to it wouldn't have worked for their constituents. It's way too rural. And especially some of those Durham ones as well. If you started talking about slashing rail fares, I don't think it was that relevant, really.
No. Right. I mean, what do you think? See, what were the different strands of opinion about what was to blame?
I think actually the party membership, in terms of going forward, there's a consensus there that the manifesto wasn't the problem. Actually, it was the fact that it was incredibly ambitious and it was poorly communicated. I mean, I found it quite difficult. I mean, as a journalist, there would be press releases, I'm sure you found, the night before about several different focuses on the same day. And it was like several different manifestos being released on the same day. And that was quite confusing for people. You didn't even have a single focus each day of the campaign.
Right, but does that mean a different messenger? You would have won the election then with that manifesto?
No, because I think one of the biggest issues with Jeremy Corbyn was the baggage that was there from 30 years of having associated himself with causes that people, generally speaking, in your average Sedgefield or Wakefield voter just does not relate to at all. But there is a broader issue. It's not just about Corbyn, it's about Corbynism, and it's clear that we need to fundamentally now have a set of policies which talk much more about security, national security, economic security, and then really empowering the communities that have been left behind, a sort of sense of community cohesion and security and reuniting the country.
But did it shift the argument? Isn't that why the Conservatives and Boris Johnson are looking at all this investment that they're going to make? Nothing on the scale of what Labour was promising, certainly in size, but you are going to do some of the things that Labour has been talking about.
I don't think they did shift the argument. Philip Hammond and Theresa May, way back, had already said, you know, once we get over this whatever hump that was caused, we will then invest. Of course, nobody goes into politics saying, can I have a bit more austerity? And I want to tell everybody that's what we're giving. Of course not. We all want to invest in the right thing. We all want to improve people's lives. Education, the NHS are always going to be popular. Every single manifesto will have that. There'll never be a manifesto that says they're not going to invest in police, NHS and education, ever. Things like nationalising everything. Most people look at nationalisation and think this is the Union's agenda, who have captured the Labour Party, and also Corbynistas, who have captured the Labour Party. This is a self-serving model, which, if you don't get rid of it, I think is going to be continuous. And it's not about the communication. It's about the fact it just doesn't work.
No, that's not true.
Well, OK, maybe my 30 years of business experience are different, but it just doesn't work.
I mean, of course,
got to
both
encourage
parties
investment.
talk about education and the NHS in every single election, but you have to look at what's happened to the NHS whilst you've had this period of Conservative austerity since, you know, the Cameron government, and things in the NHS have got increasingly worse.
More people using it, for sure.
More people using it, and investment hasn't kept up with that. So you definitely can't say that all of this is just about, you know, you've got to be able
to balance the books at the same time. Of course, there's
balancing the books, but then corporation tax has been so low. There are so many ways. There are so many ways in which the NHS could have been improved. And the idea now that the Conservatives can sweep in and say, look, we're going to throw loads of money at it, and then that keeps the vote. I just think it's such a lost decade for.
All right, well, hang on, Gillian. Let's talk about the leadership contest, Sienna. What is the process now for a new leader being in place by March?
So it has changed, which is interesting. It changes the rules of the game. So basically, now candidates will need 10% of the PLP, the parliamentary party, to nominate them. That's 21 MPs they need the support of. Now, Jeremy Corbyn had to get the support of 35 MPs, so the bar has been lowered there. They also need to top that up with either 5% of local parties, so that's hundreds across the country, 5% of those, and they need, or rather than local parties, rather than members' support, they can get 3 affiliated societies. That means 2 big trade unions, basically. So we're talking about the fact that, well, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Angela Rayner, whichever one of those stands, they're going to be in a really good position to get the support of trade unions because they're real trade unionist women. And the others, like Keir Starmer, might be more reliant on membership support because he will get those London constituencies snapped up pretty quickly.
Who are you going to back?
I think we need a leader that can answer the questions that this general election posed, which is particularly around re-engaging our Leave voters and showing that Leave voters are vitally important for Labour's past, present and future. There are a number of candidates out there. I want them to set out their stall. I think the sort of thing that Lisa Nandy's been saying for the last 3 years about, you know, with her Centre for Towns and really rerouting Labour in those small towns, understanding what non-graduates need. She's
Rebecca Long-Bailey
saying the right things. Look, I think a one more heave candidate for Corbynism is not the right way for our party to go. We need to send a very clear signal that we're turning the page, we're moving forward with, and we're listening to what happened to us on Thursday night. None of us ever want to feel that way again.
You wouldn't want to see then the likes of Emily Thornberry and Keir Starmer as the new leader from the backgrounds that they represent in terms of the Remain Leave argument?
I think, as somebody that felt that the decision to back a second referendum was one of the worst decisions that the Labour Party has made in its history, I think, politics is about judgment, and people who led the charge for a second referendum, I'm sure that they will have the political judgment that we need to take on the leadership.
Do you think, Steve, having an accelerated timetable might make it easier for Corbynistas to get someone in they support? Having a longer time could allow more moderates to join the party and make it more of an even battle?
It's very difficult to say now, but I'm just urging every single Labour Party member out there who may be listening to this programme to please think about, do we want Labour to be a party of government again? I also take heart from the fact that in the trigger ballots that happened, in the vast majority of cases, sensible, rooted, real-world MPs actually won and did quite well. So I'm hoping that our party is still there for being a responsible party of government.
I think we need to be really... Labour needs to be very careful when it talks about the North and Northern voters. And I don't think it's entirely necessary that Northern voters will only vote for a Northern person, or that's the only thing that's the only thing that's important to them. So actually, although I know people that are very much on the left who have actually thought, Keir Starmer might actually be a good shout, and I was really surprised to hear that. But I think there's a little bit of sort of reflection over the weekend and thinking, look, we need someone who can win, and I don't think some of these London people should be discounted.
What about Jess Phillips? Because she wrote yesterday that the party must change and wanted to encourage new members to vote, or members who've left to come back into the party. Will the party allow new members to join to cast a vote?
Yes, so actually the rulebook has changed on that as well. It means that the freeze date is somewhere in between ballots having to come in and the timetable being set. So actually they can't set eligibility of membership from before the election or anything like that. So that's out of the equation. So actually, Jess Phillips, maybe Yvette Cooper, maybe some other people like that will be relying on signing up new members and maybe registered supporters as well, if that comes into the equation.
Right. I mean, Caroline Flint, who was the MP for Don Valley, she lost her seat, has said the answer cannot be Corbyn without a beard. Who is she thinking of?
You've got a beard, Steve.
I've got a beard, so that's definitely me. Look, I don't know who Caroline was thinking of specifically there, but as I say, a one more heave candidate is not the right way to go.
Right, but it's already turning bitter because Caroline Flint, who I've just mentioned and lost her seat, has said that the Shadow Foreign Secretary Emily Thornberry had made a remark about voters in her Yorkshire constituency. She said Emily Thornberry allegedly said she was glad my constituents aren't as stupid as yours. Well, Emily Thornberry has responded this morning. Let's have a listen.
Caroline Flint was told by somebody else that I had spoken to somebody else, that person unknown, and when unknown, and where unknown, and she still won't, tell us, that people were supposed to be stupid. I would never even think that, let alone say it. It's a complete lie. So I've said to Caroline, come on, Caroline, this isn't true. Withdraw it and I'll give you till the end of the day. And she refuses to. So I've had to go through all the hassle of instructing solicitors, and that's what we're doing. We're having to take legal action.
It's going well, isn't it, Stephen?
I think it'd be a real pity if we descend into a blame game. We need truth and reconciliation in the party, and you can't have reconciliation without truth. We've got to have people being honest about the fact that the decision to back a second referendum was a disaster, but we also have to be honest about the fact that Corbyn and Corbynism have been a disaster. Everybody needs to come out of their entrenched positions and have a real and robust discussion. I really hope it doesn't get, dragged down into personal...
Do you think Emily should just drop that prospect of legal action?
You'd have to ask Emily that question herself. She clearly feels very strongly that Caroline's misrepresented what she has supposed to have said, allegedly. I would much prefer it if they had that conversation and sorted out between themselves.
Who do the Tories fear most as the next Labour leader?
You know what? It's up to Labour Party who they choose as their leader.
Sure, I know that, but who do you fear the most?
Not a single MP, Labour MP, said they would campaign to leave. Not a single one. So they went from 20...
Ian Lavery said he would.
Any advance on Ian Lavery?
No, and there isn't time to advance on it, so all right, we had to. Thank you there, Sienna. That's all we've got time for from all of us here. Bye-bye.